In the Mojave Wasteland, every player has at least once visited irradiated and half-ruined Camp Searchlight. Today, we'll look at what happened here and also analyze a few interesting findings. Upon visiting, three things immediately stand out from the environment: ghoulified NCR soldiers, thick green radioactive fog, and relatively well-preserved buildings. To begin analyzing the story and answering the questions that arise, we need to go back in time. Camp Searchlight wasn't always an NCR camp, nor was it always connected to military structures. Before the bombs fell in the Fallout universe, Searchlight was a growing town with a large number of tourists who stopped there on their way to Vegas or the Colorado River. The town's feature is its location at the intersection of Highways 95 and 164, which made it such a bustling place. From the report of the fire station chief, you can learn that on the day the bombs fell, the police, for safety reasons, redirected 3 trucks carrying nuclear waste from San Onofre, which is a mentioned organization and apparently a location in California that owned a nuclear reactor and produced energy. 2 trucks were left in the garage of the Searchlight fire station, filling all available space inside. After that, the settlement was abandoned for a very long time. The NCR didn't establish themselves in the town immediately. In 2253, roughly 20 years before the events of the game, the NCR in the history of Fallout world began the Mojave campaign. The introduction of a military contingent began because in that same year, 38 NCR soldiers were brutally executed by raiders. The current president, T-Bade, was removed from office, and her successor, Wendell Peterson, decided to send 3 NCR battalions to the Mojave, with the goal of pacifying the raiders and creating safe routes for the citizens of the Republic. Besides the Mojave outpost, the NCR spread their presence further and further across the wasteland, and at some point, the operation's objectives changed. It's unknown exactly when, but the NCR leadership chose Searchlight to establish a military base and named it Camp Searchlight. The camp very quickly transformed into a major transportation hub, supplying other Republic's bases with the necessary resources. The increased presence and conflict of interests with the Legion led to armed clashes between the factions. Poor management and a series of defeats were reflected in the soldiers' morale and organization. To find out what happened in Searchlight after its establishment as an NCR base up to the events of the game, you need to dig through the several terminal entries that can be found around the camp. We'll look into the case of missing supplies, and then see why the troops were so careless, before moving on to the heart of what happened in Searchlight. In the first entry, the quartermaster, responsible for resource deliveries, questions the decreasing amount of supplies. The incoming shipments are much smaller than usual. Provisioner decides to ask communications officer if there are any problems with message transmission, to which the officer insisted that there were no problems, and the system was working properly. The quartermaster contacted the supply distribution centra, but they also told him that all requests were being fulfilled on time, and all resources had been successfully sent to Searchlight. At this point, the supply officer thinks either he's being lied to, or someone is intercepting shipments for the camp. Furthermore, during his free time, the provisioner decides to check the transportation route used for supply deliveries. He met a traveler on the road, and asked if they had seen any NCR supplies heading towards Searchlight. From traveler's words, it becomes clear that someone was carrying boxes of NCR supplies from Nipton, but who was doing that and where they were going to was unknown. What was definitely clear is that those moving the NCR crates were not wearing the standard uniforms of the Republic. The quartermaster writes that on his next day off, he'll try to visit Nipton and find out what's happening there. There are a couple more paragraphs worth reviewing before clarifying the circumstances. In the communication logs between NCR camps, one of the soldiers will say that the quartermaster was annoying him again, asking questions about equipment malfunction and missing supplies. The officer continued to insist that the system was fine and that maybe his numbers were incorrect. He thinks the provisioner doesn't believe him and will keep bothering him with questions until he proves there are no communication problems or until he finds someone else to blame. To clarify the events, you'll need to visit Nipton, where the Legion, at the time of the game, held the well-known Nipton lottery. There are almost no NCR soldiers to be seen anywhere. However, in Nipton's hotel, you can find the bodies of 4 troopers. We won't be looking at what exactly happened in Nipton, but it's worth noting the presence of Oliver Swanik and Boxcars, 2 powder gangers who, so to speak, won the Legion's lottery. What the powder gangers were doing there is very important for today's story, as is what Nipton was like before the events of the game. By the 23rd century, Nipton was already known as a not-so-good place to live, surviving off theft, prostitution and other criminal activities, which the local mayor, Joseph Stein, covered up. In the mayor's records, you can learn that Nipton was especially popular among NCR soldiers because of Rosie and Sylvia, who, although were not beautiful, provided much-needed service to lonely soldiers. After spending too much time in this backwater, NCR soldiers are ready to seek attention even from those who look like mole rats and smell no better. Stores pay part of the profits left by Republic troops directly to the mayor, but even that isn't enough for him. After a riot at NCR correctional facility, powder gangers were formed as a faction, which immediately became interesting to Joseph, and he established contacts with them. Nipton began actively trading with the powder gangers and provided them with the same services. To prevent the powder gangers and the Republicans from shooting each other, the mayor controls their presence, but usually the former prisoners come during the day and the soldiers at night, and so far they've never run into each other. By the end of Nipton's life, Vulpes Inculta approaches the mayor to pit the powder gangers against the soldiers, offering 8,000 cups, to which he agrees. From the available information, you can make as many as 3 assumptions about why the supply shortage occurred in Searchlight. NCR soldiers were selling supplies to use services in Nipton. Someone hired by the mayor was stealing supply crates, or it could have been the powder gangers. However, all of them would be incorrect. Asking Boxcars about the missing NCR supplies, you can understand that legionaries were carrying some crates into a nearby cave, which possibly belonged to the Republic. This matches the testimony of the traveler, questioned by the supply officer. Next, to have a better understanding of troopers' morale and organization, you can find 2 more communication entries at Searchlight Camp. In the first, Signaler recounts that patrols didn't notice Red Scorpion that sneaked into the camp one night, and it was only discovered because it chewed on the wiring of the satellite dishes, which the system alerted them about. Upon understanding this, the soldiers decided to check it out, finding the Scorpion destroying their equipment. The next entry states that after the incident with the Scorpion, the patrol schedule and route were changed for the 3rd time in a month. The command probably didn't understand that the problem wasn't in the patrols, but the troops who couldn't immediately get used to the new routes, leaving gaps in them. The signaler hopes the Legion doesn't find out about this. So, what do we have at this point? NCR soldiers established a military camp at a very convenient intersection of 2 highways, which obviously bothered the Legion. Over time, the camp grew into a hub that supplied other camps. NCR soldiers, on their way to the camp, often stopped in Nipton and spent their money on local women, booze and possibly camps. Because the Republicans came to Nipton at night, heading straight to the local girls, no one was usually guarding the supplies, which allowed legionaries to steal them without being noticed. One of the quartermasters tried to get to the bottom of it, but apparently never found answers to his questions. The NCR command didn't even try to improve soldier organization, turning a blind eye to the missing supplies, low morale and available entertainment. Camp patrols changed very often, resulting in soldiers not being able to remember them, leaving gaps in Searchlight's defense. The Red Scorpion was an example that organization had hit rock bottom, as it was only discovered when it started chewing on the satellite dish cables. Officers, like the signaler, instead of finding the sources of problems, looked for convenient targets to blame. Now, let's jump to the time of the game's events and look at how the camp, which seemed easy to capture, ended up scorched by radiation. Camp Searchlight is located slightly west of the Legion's fortress Cottonwood Cove. Although it would have been easy to conquer, the legionaries saw no interest in it, but they still wanted to get rid of the NCR presence there. Sometime before the events of the game, Vulpes Inculta, the leader of the Legion's elite from Intari, sent several soldiers on a secret mission to find weaknesses in the camp's defense. Learning about the chaos, the supply deliveries, and the waste stored there, he decided to implement a plan to sabotage the camp, making it uninhabitable. Vulpes sent a couple of recruits with the task of infiltrating the fire station garage and opening the tanks inside the trucks. They most likely didn't know the contents of the cisterns, as from a note on one of the bodies, you can identify that they were supposed to report back back to Volpes upon returning to camp. After opening 2 out of 6 tanks, a massive amount of radiation was suddenly released into the environment, almost instantly killing the legionaries and turning the NCR soldiers in the camp into ghouls. Literally speaking, making it unusable for the Republic for a very long time, thereby securing Cottonwood Cove. Speaking of the dirty bomb used by the Legion, it's worth mentioning another one you can find in Cottonwood Cove itself. Initially, if you remember, there were 3 waste trucks, but only 2 fit into the garage of the Searchlight. The last one was sent to Cottonwood Cove. On one of the hills, you can find a truck. Upon opening the trailer, the waste barrels stored inside will fall down into the Legion camp, killing all legionaries and their captives, thus turning the Legion stronghold into a second Searchlight. Such a significant loss of the camp at the intersection of 2 logistical arteries couldn't have no consequences for the NCR. The only somewhat significant forces capable of opposing the Legion were based at Camp Makaran and the Mojave outpost. Raids on Mojave territory occurred more frequently. Nipton was captured by legionaries as well as Nelson. There is nothing more to say about the history of the camp itself, so we'll look at 2 quests and several discoveries you can make at this location. Approaching the camp, you can notice a group of Sergeant Astor who were outside the base at the time of the sabotage, thus avoiding gullification. Now, on a voluntary basis, they warn travelers of the danger and try to discourage them from visiting the town. Astor is forced to watch his degraded comrades from a distance and understands that they can no longer be helped. From his diary, you can get that since the sabotage, after the disappearance of Searchlight's leadership, he managed to maintain order and establish a normal patrol outside the camp perimeter. Until today, he had managed to catch all travelers heading towards Searchlight and keep them away from death. There are 2 quests associated with Astor, Eye for an Eye and We Will All Go Together. During the first, you can start spying on the Legion and destroy Cottonwood Cove, or betraying the NCR, feed them false information about the Legion. During the second, you'll need to bring Astor 10 medallions from gullified NCR soldiers. There are also a few other people in Searchlight. Private Edwards is a gullified NCR soldier who didn't become a Feral One. After the sabotage, he settled in one of the houses and is afraid to leave it because of his gullified comrades and the rat scorpions in the area. Also, he doesn't know if he can return to the NCR because of the unclear attitude toward the ghouls in the faction. He suspects he'd be shot on sight due to the usual prejudice against ghouls, and he's actually right about that. One of the medallions for the We Will All Go Together can be obtained from him, and he's also associated with the unmarked quest Arachnophobia. As already mentioned, the private is afraid of rat scorpions, which you can kill yourself or lie to Kyle about them, resulting in him dying when he goes outside. If you do get rid of rat scorpions, you will need to find a place where he could go. Talking to Astor, you can convince him to accept the ghoul into his team, passing intelligence or speech checks. You can lie to Edwards and send him to Astor, resulting in the ghoul being shot. It's possible to send Kyle to Echo Station, where most of the workers are NCR ghouls. After some time visiting Ranger Station Echo, Kyle will be there. You can also send Kyle to wander the wastelands. Finally, you can discover a group from the Crimson Caravan in the basement of the local church. Talking to Logan starts the quest Wheel of Fortune. He and several others were hired by the Crimson Caravan to salvage resources left in the camp and look for any easy profit. But unfortunately, they need radiation suits. Obtaining them is crucial to loot and visit the police and fire stations in the town. In another church's basement, you can also find an Easter egg referencing Monty Python. 3 holy grenades will be in one of the boxes, guarded by 2 golden geckos, and appear if you have the Wild Wasteland perk. In its absence, there will be 2 mini nukes. The grenades deal 520 damage, instead of 80 like the regular ones. Summarizing all the known information about the camp, you can conclude that the NCR is to be blamed for the tragedy that occurred in Searchlight. Morale, discipline and organization were undermined by incompetent leadership. They turned a blind eye to the entertainment soldiers got used to in Nipton, losing precious supplies stolen by legionaries, and they frequently changed orders. A string of frontline defeats and stretched logistics lowered morale in an army where recruits are afraid of rat scorpions. Officers, instead of looking for the cause of problems, look for someone convenient to blame, and only stir when a problem becomes too obvious. Legionaries, taking advantage of the Republic's weaknesses, infiltrated the camp twice and completely disabled it, securing Cottonwood Cove and establishing themselves in the Mojave. As a result, the NCR's influence was shaken, and the Legion continued to attack the Republic, seizing more and more territory under its control. And that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed today's video and you'll give it a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell button and leave your comment below. See you next time.